Welcome to High Road. My name's Andrew, and in this video today we're going to try out the C trumpet that I built, and my friend John here is going to compare these 4 trumpets for us. So this is John. This is my friend John. He's a professional trumpet player. We've known each other for a little while. We actually have a fair bit in common.
Yeah.
We used to carpool together. We worked at the same school together.
Yeah.
And what John's going to do for us today, he's going to actually play the C trumpet that I've been working on, but he's also going to compare it to his very lovely $10,000, was it a Taylor? A Taylor C trumpet, so we can see the differences with that. I'll show you the trumpets. This is John's $10,000 Taylor trumpet. This is the C trumpet that I built. This is a plastic C trumpet for what it's worth. And the last one is actually the same as this trumpet. These are both King 600 models. So this is like before, this is after.
That's the C trumpet version.
Yeah.
Wow, great job on the silver plating.
Yeah?
Yeah. I think you got an air leak on the third slide. You can feel the air's leaking.
It's a new cork.
Yeah, it's not sealing. I usually put blue tack in there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
Hold that. That's what we used to do for kids when I was teaching. Blue tack should do the job. Yeah, if you open it up, just pop it in there. That's heaps better.
Okay, we're going to do a series of blind tests now to try and hear the differences between these trumpets. In these tests, John's going to play the same musical examples on all 4 trumpets, but you won't know which one he's playing until afterwards. The purpose of this experiment is to try and explore some of the commonly held beliefs about trumpets that I've always wanted to know more about. One is that expensive trumpets sound better than cheap trumpets, and that sounds pretty reasonable. Another is that metal trumpets sound better than plastic trumpets, which also sounds pretty common sense. But the one I'm really interested in is whether C trumpets actually sound different to B-flat trumpets. So in no particular order, the trumpets in this test will be a $10,000 Taylor C trumpet, a plastic C trumpet that I got off Amazon, the King 600 C trumpet that I made, and a King 600 B-flat trumpet that's going to be playing upper tone so that it sounds in the same key as the other trumpets. All the examples were recorded on a Zoom H6 recorder placed just off screen, about 1.5 meters in front of the trumpet. Ready to give it a try? Let's see if you can guess which trumpet is which. So what did you think? Could you tell which trumpet was which? Before you go any further, I'd love you to pause the video and leave a comment below with your guesses before I reveal the answers in 3, 2, 1, here we go. Trumpet 1 was the plastic trumpet. Trumpet 2 was the King 600 B-flat trumpet playing upper tone. Trumpet 3 was the $10,000 Taylor C trumpet. And trumpet 4 was the King 600 C trumpet that I made. So how'd you go? Were your guesses correct? Were the differences what you thought they would be? Now before I give my opinion and we hear from John, I'm going to play you those examples again, but this time you're going to be able to see which one is which. Here we go. Alright, here's what I took away from that. I can hear differences between the trumpets, of course, but those differences are much smaller than I'd expected them to be, which I think is a clue into the fact that most of what you're hearing coming out of a brass instrument is the player. The trumpet is a much smaller component than you may realise. You look at those 4 trumpets, one cost 130, 160 bucks on Amazon and one was 10 grand, and John was able to get all of them to sound incredible. So that tells you that the ratio is weighted towards the player. That's the most important thing in the sound. Let's get that clear, okay? He's a pro. The other thing I found interesting was that some of the differences I heard were actually just tiny variations in the way John played. But that's significant because despite what the listener hears, the way a trumpet feels to the person playing it affects the way they play. So that's another little clue that tells me that some of the biggest differences between these trumpets are not things that the listener can pick up on. They're things that only the person playing them can pick up on, which is why we're going to hear what John thought a little bit later. So purely from a listening perspective, here's my opinion on the 4 trumpets. When I heard John play the $10,000 Taylor trumpet, I thought his playing sounded relaxed and pure and true, probably because that trumpet is so effortless to play. And probably it gives you a confidence when you play it as well, because you know what you're holding. When he played the other 3 trumpets though, I could hear a slight increase in energy in his playing, which I was initially drawn to, but upon repeated listens, I think that's actually because the other 3 trumpets are harder to play, therefore he was putting in more effort, which came across as a sort of an artificial excitement in the tone. But really, I think they're just harder to play. The more I listened though, I could hear a smooth silkiness in the upper frequencies of the Taylor that the other 3 didn't have. So I think that's really where it's got the edge. At the other end of the spectrum, with the plastic trumpet, I could hear that it had a slightly duller tone, or maybe a warmer tone if you want to be positive about it. And the last 2 trumpets, the 2 King 600s in C and B flat, I couldn't really hear a lot of tonal difference between those 2. Though I would probably group them closer to the Taylor end of the spectrum than the plastic trumpet end of the spectrum. Anyway, that's what I thought. Let's hear what John's impressions were.
Well, yeah, absolutely. So, like in my opinion, the professional Model C trumpet is the vastly superior instrument there. It's the most free blowing. The notes all slot in place where they're supposed to, and I'm fighting the instrument less in terms of the intonation.
Yeah.
Everything's, all the notes are in the right places or pretty close.
Yeah.
You're never going to get a perfectly in tune instrument. You still, every instrument's got its little intricacies where you've got certain notes are a little bit flatter or sharper depending on where you are on the range. And that goes for any manufacturer and any key trumpet. There's always those little intricacies. So the professional model C trumpet, definitely the best one. The other instruments, they play great. They're lighter. The brass isn't as thick, so it's a brighter tone. The plastic trumpet for me personally is the one that I have to fight with the most and get the least reward out of playing it. It looks fantastic. It's nice and light in terms of ergonomics, but in terms of getting pleasure from the sound I'm making on it would be the least pleasurable. But yeah, the C trumpet you made is surprisingly in tune. I mean, it's got its little, it's not perfect, but like I said, no instrument is.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Interesting, isn't it? So let's get back to the common beliefs about trumpets that I mentioned at the start of the video. Number one, that expensive trumpets sound better than cheap trumpets. I mean, based on this experiment, I would have to say yes, but I don't really know why. Also, I don't think the differences are as big as I expected them to be. There's this thing called the law of diminishing returns, where the more you spend, the smaller the differences get. So if you have a $500 trumpet and you go to a $1,000 trumpet, that's a much bigger difference than going from a $1,000 trumpet to a $10,000 trumpet. But apart from that, a lot of these differences are more important to the player than the listener, like I mentioned. There's a confidence that comes from holding an expensive instrument that you know you can depend on, and you know what it's going to do, and you don't have to fight it. And that's going to make you play better, and therefore your tone and your sound is going to be better because of that. And that's a human factor, not a trumpet factor, but it's a factor. So I'd have to say yes, that expensive trumpets in general sound better than cheap trumpets. Number two, that metal trumpets sound better than plastic trumpets. This is a tricky one and it's completely subjective. Some of you may think that metal trumpets sound way better than plastic, but I actually kind of like the sound of plastic. It's got a warm, direct, mid-rangey kind of sound that has a place in the toolkit, probably especially in the studio. I do think a plastic trumpet is going to sit in a mix differently to the way a metal trumpet would, and that's a really useful thing in the studio. So no, I don't think metal sounds better than plastic. I think they sound different. Number three, do C trumpets sound different to B flat trumpets? Now this is going to be a bit of a controversial one. I really don't think that they sound different, no. Not if the construction is the same, the design is the same, the materials are the same, and all things are equal. There should be no reason why a C trumpet should have any different tone to a B flat trumpet. So then why do so many trumpet players believe that C trumpets sound different to B flat trumpets? Well, I can think of at least 4 reasons. Number one, it could be because quite often C trumpets are different. They're constructed differently. They sometimes have a larger bore, heavier materials, different construction. And so if you compare one of those to a standard B flat or even a similar B flat, there's still going to be differences. So you're not comparing apples to apples. Number two, almost no one makes a cheap C trumpet, so they're almost always expensive. Therefore, when you're comparing a C trumpet to a B flat trumpet, probably what you're really comparing is expensive to cheap. Number three, I don't think a lot of trumpet players have had the opportunity to do a proper, fair, side-by-side comparison. Let's say you're in a brass store trying out trumpets and you pick up a B flat trumpet and you play something. Probably what a lot of players are going to do is they're going to pick up a C trumpet and they're going to play the same thing a tone higher. And when they do that, it's going to sound perceptively brighter. So I think that's a common experience for a lot of trumpet players, and I think that's probably where a lot of this mythology comes from. And number four, the human ear sometimes has trouble making audible comparisons between sounds that are spaced too far apart. So in the time it takes you to pick up one trumpet and play it and put it down, take the mouthpiece out and pick up the other trumpet, put the mouthpiece in and play it, the ear has actually lost its objectivity. So to press the point, let's listen to the 2 King 600s again, side by side in quick succession, to give our ears a chance at a stable comparison. And just to clarify what you're hearing here, these are 2 identical King 600s, both made in the late 70s. They're 61 serial numbers apart. Both have had their lacquer removed. One has had silver plating, but that silver plating is so thin, I really don't even count it as a factor. It's 3 microns thin, which is about 30 times thinner than a human hair. So basically what we're comparing here is apples to apples. It's a really rare chance to do this because most of the time when you're comparing a C trumpet to a B flat trumpet, there's so many differences that you really can't tell what you're hearing. In this case, I'm hoping that we can get to the bottom of it. So here's the two trumpets back to back. See what you think. Well, you already know what I think. Now I want to know what you think. Feel free to leave a comment below, but please be nice. I want to give a huge thank you to John Coulton for his excellent playing in this video, and without his help, it wouldn't have been possible to do this. If you want to know more about John and his music, he has a YouTube channel and he has a website. All the details are in the description below. Thank you, John. That was awesome.
My pleasure.
As always, if you'd like to learn how to make music, record music and build musical stuff, start now by subscribing below. My voice faltered.
Do it again.